There's an author who I came across long time ago called Hugh Prather, and he obviously came to a similar conclusion. He says, no matter how good things get, my capacity to make myself unhappy is always equal to it. I remember reading that and thinking, God, yeah, me too. Not only was that true in his life, I could see that was true in my life, and I could also see it was true in the lives of the people that I was working with. That we can spend inordinate amounts of energy shuffling around our life circumstances, trying to get all the ducks lined up, only to find something else pops out of left field, and suddenly we're up against what looks like a new problem in the outside world. And we never get to that place where we think we're going to get to by all of this achievement, all of this hard work, all of this changing jobs, houses, countries, relationships, you name it. We don't get there. And it was in 1973, this chap, Sydney Banks, just a brief little bit of background about him if you've not come across him. It's so bizarre that it was this fella that actually suddenly saw something about the human condition that really hadn't been seen before, at least not in the way that he saw it. He was not in the field of psychology, coaching, or anything like that. He was a welder working in a pulp mill on the west coast of Canada. He'd grown up in Scotland, moved with his adopted family to Canada, had his troubles in life, as everybody does, and by his own admission was an insecure human being. He just took it that that was the deal, you know. And if you asked him, well, why are you insecure, Sid? He had a list of reasons going back in childhood as to why he was the way he was. And one day, in his early 40s, he had a spontaneous realization. He caught sight of the fact that it wasn't that he himself was an insecure person. What he saw was that he had a lot of insecure thoughts about himself. And that as long as he held those thoughts to be true, sure enough, he felt insecure. But the moment he saw that it was just thought, it wasn't a truth about him, and he saw something about the nature of thought. What's the nature of thought? It comes and goes. It's a momentary phenomena which doesn't have any life of its own unless you kind of buy into it, unless you feed it, unless you believe it. The moment he saw that, he said it was like waking up from a dream. What he thought had been real and true, suddenly he saw, well, that's not true. It's not that I am actually insecure. And his insecurity literally fell away. Without him working on it, without him going into his past, without any kind of technique or psychological process, it just fell away. He felt great. He felt absolutely wonderful, and he visibly changed. So from being a guy who would kind of shy away and hide the limelight, and he certainly wouldn't come to an event like this, hanging out in a crowd, and he definitely wouldn't be stood at the front of the room like I am, he became someone. He held himself differently. His poise changed, his facial features changed. He started speaking with great confidence and great authority. Within a matter of months, people were flocking to his house to listen to his talks, and within a couple of years he was being invited to give talks to professors, PhD psychologists and so on, and completely blowing their minds about a subject that he had no training in. So he was speaking directly from his own experience and from what he called the wisdom behind all of life. And he went on to write a few books about this, and he shared his experience for the rest of his life with anyone who would listen. And he said thought is the missing link. He said it's the missing link in psychology, it's the missing link in spirituality, religion. He said, I don't care what field you're interested in. He says it's the fact that thought hasn't been taken into account. That's why there are so many anomalies, disagreements and contradictions in the different fields. And there's a little quote from him there. He says, thought is not reality, but it's through thought that our realities are created. We're actually using the gift of thought to create our own experience of life. Now, you've probably heard that before. I'd certainly heard that before. There wasn't anything radically new in that for me. But that's not the whole story. A couple of days after he had this initial realization, he went on and had further insights. And one of his subsequent insights, just a few days afterwards, he saw himself to be a part of the whole. And his sense of being an independent person or personality, if you like, literally fell away. He felt himself to be connected to the whole scheme of things. And looking out at the world from that perspective, he suddenly saw, oh my God, we're all in the same boat. Everybody's walking around using the gift of thought to create their experience, which they're maybe not enjoying, but they don't see that it's themselves that's actually doing it. He saw that we're all creating our experience using what he came to term the three principles. But because it's largely invisible to us, we suffer the consequences of what we ourselves are creating completely innocently without realizing that we ourselves are the creator of it. And when he saw that, he was like, wow, this is amazing. So much suffering is unnecessary. So much struggle in life. What people think they're up against in their external world isn't actually true. What they're up against is their own thoughts about life and about themselves. If only people could see that. So he dedicated the rest of his life to helping people to see that as best he could. Now, he passed away in 2009. Fortunately, in his lifetime, he shared consistently with anybody who would listen, and there were many people who not only got inspired by what he was saying, but they actually got transformed themselves just by listening to him. And there were many psychologists who went to visit him, and they were trying to find out, well, what's the technique? You know, they found these miraculous transformations were happening in people's lives. People who'd been chronically depressed, let's say, in some cases diagnosed with things like schizophrenia, bipolar, so-called incurable psychological states, deep-seated habit patterns and even addictions, self-destructive behaviors, which have been going on for years. People would hang around, listen to him, suddenly wake up, and the addiction would fall away. The behavior would change. Person would reconcile with their family members. These kind of things just started to happen routinely. The psychologists were deeply puzzled because he didn't appear to be doing anything. He wasn't giving anybody any practices. He wasn't giving anybody any advice as to what they should do differently. What he was saying was, you have within yourself everything that you need to live a healthy, beautiful, meaningful life. And the only thing that's obscuring that is the way that you're using thought innocently. And he just tried as best he could to put that across so that people could see it for themselves. Because he realized that he couldn't give to anybody else what had come to him spontaneously. What he saw was that his own insight was what had changed him. It wasn't anything that he'd done or learned. So it's lucky that he saw that. Otherwise he would have probably turned it into a teaching. You know, we'd have a dogma or something like that. Before you know it, we'd have a new religion. Fortunately, he didn't go that route. He saw that the only thing that transforms people is when they see it from within. So he realized the work, if you can call it that, is very simple. We create a conducive environment within which people see for themselves something that they haven't seen before. You catch a glimpse of it, and then it does the work for you. Now, he shared his experience for probably 9 or 10 years in a variety of different ways. And you can probably relate to this, that if you've ever done something that was really a wonderful experience for you, maybe you climbed a mountain, or you skied for the first time, or you just did something that really was absolutely fantastic for you, and then you tried to tell someone about it, and you tried to give them a sense of what it was. Have you noticed how difficult that is? No matter how enthusiastic you are, or how clearly you've been moved and impressed by that experience, you can't actually give it to anybody else. And even if they were there with you, they won't have had the same identical experience that you had. To them it might have just been another, well, it was okay, you know. To you it was like, no, it was fantastic. So it took some time, but over a period of years, Sid Banks tried a variety of different ways to share what he'd experienced so that people could actually catch on, so they could start to get a sense of it. Eventually he settled on this terminology, mind, thought, and consciousness. Now I want to emphasize to you that the words themselves are not what's important, because the words are just references, they're pointers, and it's what they're pointing to that is actually the important piece of the puzzle. So don't get hung up on the words, and if you don't like the terminology, you could actually substitute your own words and it wouldn't make any difference, okay? It's what the words are inferring or referring to that's crucial. So here's what Sid Banks came to say. He said, there's basically only three components to a human experience. There's three essential ingredients, if you like, that we can reduce it down to. And he said the first and obvious is that the person needs to be alive. You need that life force intelligence needs to be operating. Otherwise, you're talking to a corpse. You're not going to get far. And I know this sounds obvious, but again, we take it for granted, that there is something that brings a human being to life. And Sid Banks saw that it's the same thing that brings everything to life, that we truly are not separate from the natural world, that there's an intelligence behind life that we ourselves are tapped into, that we're part of. It knows how to create a body. It knows how to maintain that body. It's regulating your body temperature right now. It's regulating your heartbeat. It's regulating your breathing rate. It's probably digesting the remnants of your breakfast. It's metabolizing, taking all the good stuff, putting it into your bloodstream. All of that's happening without your conscious intention and beyond your conscious control. That's the intelligence behind life. That he called that mind. So that's not a personal thing. When he's using that term mind, if you don't like that term, substitute your own. He's talking about the life force energy which is behind everything and which is essential to life.